Okay, first I need to get some demographic information from you. So, how old are you?
19.
And are you single?
No.
Okay. And could you tell me a little bit about your current learning situation?
I'm attending the University of Georgia. I do 15 hours a week. I have homework for most of my classes. A lot of them are essay-based. I'm studying English and history.
Okay. And so, what prompted you to get started at the university? What are you hoping to get out of your studies?
I'm hoping to gain expertise in some kind of field, hopefully by going to grad school. Mainly just wanted to expand my education in areas that I'm actually good at, and be able to focus on subjects that I enjoy, but that also can be helpful, like history and English, that can be kind of applied anywhere, so.
Okay. How is your current learning different or the same as your high school and previous education?
It's different, mainly just like the time spent in the classroom. I feel like we get, while there's fewer classes per week, I think we get more time, or more out of the time that we have in the classroom, just because it's usually a longer class period, and I just think that there's less focus on, like, piling information on us. Like, the professor is kind of able to dictate what they want to teach instead of having to cram a bunch of core curriculum in the classes, so it feels a little more relaxed most of the time. And I think generally we get more out of it because usually what we're learning is in an area that the professor is actually, like, an expert in and usually enjoys. And I think there's probably a little less homework, maybe not for like a STEM area class, but for my English classes, it's mainly just long-term essays, so that's different from high school.
Okay. How do you prefer to learn? And maybe you could describe a little bit about how you've experienced class so far in terms of face-to-face or online or hybrid or in terms of your own self-directed studies. Like how do you prefer to learn?
I like face-to-face instruction. I like lecture classes where I can just sit and take notes and ask questions, kind of more like traditional setup. I really don't like the flipped classroom. I don't like having to teach myself things because I learn just better by listening and then kind of like doing in class and taking notes, especially with like 1,000 level language classes. Like I took a 1,000 level French class and it was flipped classroom and I really struggled. I just prefer like that face-to-face instruction and being able to like ask questions in the moment. And I like not having as much homework because I can have more time to like study and I'm not trying to keep up with homework as much when I can just actually just go over the material. And I like essays, so.
Okay. Do you find yourself using a lot of media or technology for your learning or for your activities?
I don't, because I'm not in a lot of STEM classes. I know that they have a lot of online stuff, but I mean, we use like ELC and Emma and stuff like that, but to like turn in essays and things like that, but it's not. I guess I do use a fair amount of media actually, because that's the main way I do research for essays and stuff like that. But like in class, I don't think I use technology that often. Usually it's like pen and paper taking notes. It's usually outside the classroom where I'm using more technology, except for in my ecology class where I'm on the computer the whole time, because that's how she does attendance, is on Top Hat, like an online program. So I think with STEM classes it's a little different, but with all my humanities classes I don't use technology a lot in the classroom.
Okay. Do you think that you could ever describe anything that you've done as self-directed learning, where there wasn't a class that was prompting you to complete activities? Have you ever experienced that in kind of an informal setting?
I mean, I'd like to do a lot of just research by myself. I tend to get sucked into kind of Wikipedia black holes where I'll find a wiki page and then look through all the sources on like a subject I'm interested in. I've thought about doing my own research on things that I kind of don't have access to in my classes, like certain subjects that just haven't been examined as much. But I wouldn't say that I've like completed any kind of like journal or essay on my own. It's mainly just reading things that interest me, usually in history.
Okay. Have you ever experienced any barrier to you attaining your goals? Has there ever been an obstacle or difficulty that you've had to overcome in order to continue learning?
Not really. It's mainly just sometimes you get busy, but that's more I wouldn't say that's like as much of a classroom obstacle as like like concern just about completing assignments, but I haven't really had a professor or a class that like put up a lot of barriers yet. It's been pretty smooth.
Okay. Do you think that you said you take 15 hours a semester? Do you know, you feel like that's a good balance for you in terms of being able to complete things?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you describe what you think brings about successful learning, whether it's something in the classroom environment or the professor, what the professor's doing, what the students do? What do you think brings about learning?
I think the professor has to be really enthusiastic about what they're teaching. Like, I can tell if a professor doesn't really want to be there, and it doesn't make me want to be there either. Even in, like, classes where I haven't been as interested, as long as the professor is, like, really willing to engage you and is really, like, passionate about what they're teaching and is willing to kind of, like, try different teaching styles to reach, like, different needs, I think usually that prompts a lot more success, and it makes students a lot more willing to ask questions because they don't think that you're gonna, like, abuse them for not understanding something, because I've heard about, like, friends in other subjects, especially chemistry, which is, like, notorious at my university, that they'll ask questions and they're treated like they're stupid, so they don't want to ask questions, and then they fail their tests because they don't know how to do certain things. So I think the teacher has to be enthusiastic about both the subject and, like, teaching it to other people, like, wanting other people to learn about it. Like, I find that professors who try to encourage you to, like, switch to their major are usually the best, because they're really trying to, like, make you enjoy something that they love also, and, like, actually help you get something out of the class, even if it's just, like, a requirement course or something like that. So
do you think that that enthusiasm and that passion is as important, more important, or less important than their actual skill in teaching and the way that they, plan activities, for example?
I mean, I would say it's just as important, because if you're really passionate about your subject but you're completely disorganized, that can kind of turn off some students, because I'm in a class right now that's like that. The professor's really enthusiastic, but none of us ever know what's going on because he's super just disorganized. Sometimes we sit in class and don't really do anything. So I do think the professor also has to be, like, a good teacher, like, has to kind of understand their teaching style and make it accessible to students, because I mean, just because you're enthusiastic about your research doesn't mean that you're going to do a good job of reaching other students. So I think it's just as important.
Okay. What beyond passion, organization, how do you engage in class? When do you feel yourself most engaged in learning?
Usually if there's some kind of discussion going on, I like being able to ask questions, but also just like, I learn through discussion and, like, hearing other people's and my professor's viewpoints on certain things, especially in, like, literature classes. I think that's really important. And when I want to talk in class, that's when I feel most engaged. If I don't feel like speaking up, then that's usually a sign that I'm not really engaged with the subject, and I'm not probably getting as much out of the class.
Okay. And how do you think that you have changed through your learning experiences? Have there been any classes or experiences where on the other end of it you viewed yourself differently? In terms of what you thought you were able to do or the direction that you thought you were going to take? Have there ever been any instances where you felt like something changed your path?
Well, I wasn't studying English until I took an English class my freshman year. I had this professor who was, and I already liked English, but I didn't think I was going to study it because I was like, literature isn't quite my thing. I don't like studying rhyme scheme, but she actually made me really enjoy it. She had a really discussion-based class, and she kind of showed me, like, a different side of literature, sort of, that went beyond just, like, poetry constructs that I wasn't really interested in. Like, it actually talked about the meaning and, like, historical, like, cultural importance of literature, and that kind of changed my view on poetry especially, but also just literature as a whole. And that was, again, like, a professor who's really enthusiastic about what she's teaching, and, like, really wanted to make us love her subject area.
Okay. In terms of motivation, you talked a little bit about being motivated by a passionate professor, by discussion. Are you motivated by grades? Or is there something else that drives you to want to perform? What makes you want to perform up to your best?
Grades are probably not, I mean, I don't want to fail, but that doesn't tend to motivate me as much, because if I'm just not enjoying class, I tend to just not care what my grade is, because there's no, like, if I don't want to learn, sometimes it can be kind of hard to make myself learn, even if my grades are bad. I would say more like if there's a professor that I really like, I don't want to disappoint them, so I'm not going to turn in crap whenever I write essays. I think I know it's not the same for some people, and if they really enjoy a subject or something, then they can kind of get past a bad professor, but I rely a lot on that face-to-face experience, like, with the professor, so if my teacher is just really unenthusiastic, maybe, like, mean, or, like, not accessible, disorganized, then that demotivates me. But if I have a professor who's really engaged and, like, wants me to do well, then I'll try and meet their standards, because I actually feel like that it becomes, like, more personal, and also they kind of make me, like, understand what I can do, and make me willing to actually meet my potential.
Okay. Do you think that after you finish your degree, do you see yourself going back to school? Or do you think you're going to try to just enter the workforce and...
Probably will go back to school, partly just because of what I'm studying. I feel like it's a little difficult to do anything that actually deals with your area of study if you're doing English and history, unless you do go back to school. But also just because they're subjects that I really enjoy, and as I mentioned, I kind of want to achieve expertise in a field of study, or like a subject area within those two fields of study, so that would obviously be a little easier to do if I went back to school. Also, just, I'm good at school. I like school most of the time, so I would like to go back.
Okay. Are there any, just thinking of the most important learning experience that you've had so far, what would you choose as one of the most significant learning experiences that you've had, whether it's formal learning or informal learning or travel or anything else? What has had the most impact on you?
In college?
In general.
I mean, that professor I mentioned earlier had a big impact on me. Also in high school, I did an exchange to Germany, and that definitely had a big impact on me. Kind of made me more comfortable with, like, myself and my abilities or potential. But I'm kind of just still getting the hang of it. I'm still pretty early in my college career, so I'm sure I have a lot more experiences like that to be had.
Okay. Well, do you think that you would be very different if you hadn't had that professor, or if you had not had that travel experience?
I would definitely be a lot different if I hadn't had the travel experience. The professor, I probably would not have switched over to English, because since then I haven't had another English class that's made me that enthusiastic about literature. I mean, I still am enthusiastic about literature, but that kind of sparked it, so I don't know if I'd be in the same subject area right now if I hadn't had that class.
Okay. Do you think that you, in terms of being in the humanities, have different expectations for your own learning than someone who, let's say, is involved in science or math?
Yeah, I feel like mine is more, I focus more on, like, what I'm getting out of a class. I feel like whenever you're a STEM major, you have a lot less choice of, like, what classes you get to take and what professors you get to study under. So I feel like they're a little more focused on grades, and just making it through a class, like, passing, because, I mean, their classes just tend to be more, it's vigorous in a different way, but, more time-consuming, and kind of just, like, more difficult to grasp, especially because I just don't think STEM, at least at my university, it just tends to not have as great of professors. They just don't have a lot of empathy for their students, is what I've personally observed from just, like, anecdotes from friends who are in the STEM program, and they do have some good professors, and I hear about those, and those are the classes that my friends tend to do better in because they actually want to learn. But I feel like grades are just the biggest motivator, while I'm kind of more focused on, like, what I'm personally getting out of the class and how that could apply to what I might want to research or study in the future.
So do you think that in the end those factors become barriers for those students?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, if you have to take chemistry 3 times because you keep failing it, that's a big barrier to your learning experience, and it makes you start to hate what you're studying, and it can be really difficult to catch up. I mean, they just have so many requirements that are taught by terrible teachers or professors who often are, like, more focused on their research than actually teaching students. So I definitely think that they have a harder time. Like, it can be a big barrier to, like, whatever they were wanting to do, whatever they had been previously excited about. They just get bogged down in all these core classes or, like, I don't know, outside class or other classes that, I mean, they do have to do what they're studying, but they just become this huge burden because they're so difficult, and they, like, have to pass, or otherwise they can't move on to what they want to do next. So it can be frustrating.
You have a lot of friends who are STEM majors?
Yeah. Yeah, and they're always complaining about chemistry or organic chemistry. It's like a rite of passage, all these really difficult classes. So, and that's kind of just how it is, but it also is kind of detrimental to their learning experience and kind of lessens the excitement about whatever they had been intending to do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that they have more of a kind of communal, or they have to rely on community in order to get through the experience?
Yeah, they have to help each other. They're always in study groups and stuff like that.
Is the same true for humanities?
Not really. I personally, I may not be the best person to answer that just because I personally don't tend to like study groups. I kind of just do stuff on my own. But I think, we might like, like classes always have group meets and stuff like that, and we might message each other and like make sure we have all the essay requirements right, and like maybe ask kind of what people are thinking. But I feel like it's less, it's usually less homework, and we're not having like answer homework questions for each other and stuff like that, so I think it's less, we rely less on each other.
Okay. And just last thing, have you gotten into any outside training or learning, not academic learning, where you've learned a new skill or you've learned a new about a new activity or anything else that's been...
Would like sports count?
Yeah.
Yeah, I joined the club sports rugby team last spring, and that was new because I didn't really do sports in high school. So that's kind of helped me be more, like, physically confident, which I think has affected a lot of other areas of my life. And also just, like, more personally confident, so that's kind of had a big impact on, like, me personally. I don't know so much about my learning experience, but, yeah, that's kind of been it. I haven't done as much outside things outside of classes yet, but I'm hopefully gonna kind of get more into that, next semester, so.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm.